Friday morning arrived. Sunlight crept through the gap in our curtains as I awoke to the sound of the shower running in the bathroom. For a moment in that hazy state between dreams and reality, I had forgotten the turmoil of the night before. But as soon as I registered the empty space beside me in bed and the muffled sound of water, everything came rushing back. My eyes snapped open. I felt a steely resolve take hold. Today, I would start seeking answers. I found Stephanie's phone on the nightstand where she always left it overnight. My heart thudded as I picked it up. If she was careless enough not to take it into the bathroom with her, maybe I'd get a chance to see something. The screen lit up as I tapped it. Password required. Of course. We both had locks on our phones, but for years we'd known each other's codes as a sign of trust and convenience. She used to tease me for using our anniversary as my PIN. She had always used our kids' birthdays for hers. I tried entering Jason's birth date. Incorrect PIN. A small, bitter smile tugged at my lips. When had she changed it? I hadn't realized she had. I tried Megan's birthday next, just in case. Incorrect PIN. The phone locked for 30 seconds after the failed attempts, a countdown ticking away on the screen like a taunt. I set it back on the nightstand gently, my suspicions all but confirmed. She had changed her code and never told me. Another secret. The shower turned off. I quickly moved away, grabbing some clothes from the dresser to keep up the fi-8 of a normal morning. My mind was racing with next steps. If direct access to her phone was out, I'd try another avenue. We shared a wireless phone plan. Both our cell numbers were on one account that I managed online. As an accountant by trade, I'm a man who notices details and finds patterns. I strode downstairs to my home office, heart pounding, and logged into the carrier's website. My fingers flew, clicking to the recent call and text logs for her number. When the records loaded, I had to remind myself to breathe. A long list of calls and texts filled the screen, sorted by date and time. I immediately looked at yesterday's log around the time we were on the couch. There, an outgoing text at 8:17 p.m. to a number I didn't recognize. Then another at 8:19, and incoming at 8:20. The exchange continued for nearly half an hour, dozens of messages back and forth, until just before 9 p.m. when I'd caught her giggling. The number was the same throughout, a local area code I knew. No name, of course, since this was just the raw data. But I had a hunch whose number it was. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts, heart pounding. When Steph had first mentioned her project manager a couple of months back, she'd given me his number once in case of emergency while they were on a business trip. I had saved it as Colin, Steph's work. Scrolling through, I found it, and my stomach dropped as I compared it to the number on the log. A perfect match. Gotcha, I whispered, my worst suspicions confirmed in black and white digits. I sat back, running a hand through my hair. Even though I'd prepared myself, seeing actual proof made my chest ache and my hands tremble with anger. My wife had been texting her boss, her lover, right under my nose and lying about it. I fought down the urge to call that number right now and unleash hell. Not yet, I told myself. Stick to the plan. Gather evidence. I printed the log pages for the last few weeks, highlighting every late night or excessive text exchange with Colin's number. There were plenty, calls at odd hours, a spike in messages on the nights she claimed to be out with friends. It was a clear pattern of constant communication. Next, I logged into our joint credit card account. Steph and I each had personal cards, but we also had a shared Visa for household expenses, dinners out, and so on. It didn't take long to find anomalies there, too. 2 months ago, charges for dinners at 2 upscale restaurants I'd never been to. One on a night I was away visiting my brother. Another on a day she'd told me she had a working dinner. Worse, a hotel charge. The Grand Oak Inn, $289, dated 3 weeks ago. That night she had told me she and her colleague Ashley were pulling an all-nighter at the office to meet a deadline. I remembered I'd even packed her a snack bag and a thermos of coffee as a kind gesture. Meanwhile, she'd been at the Grand Oak Inn with him. I clenched my fists until the knuckles cracked. The betrayal ran deeper than just sex or romance. It was the lies upon lies, the manipulation of my trust. She'd looked me in the eye and thanked me for that thermos, promising to take a break and drink the hot coffee while working. In reality, she'd probably poured it down the sink on her way out to meet Colin. I forced myself to keep digging systematically. I downloaded copies of our bank statements in case there were cash withdrawals or odd transfers that pointed to secret spending. I didn't see anything big, no surprise accounts or large withdrawals, which made sense. Their affair probably didn't require major funds beyond those hotels and dinners. Still, I wanted everything documented. Finally, I checked our family calendar. We kept one pinned to the fridge and an online version synced to both our phones for events. Sure enough, next weekend had a note in Steph's handwriting. Marketing conference Fry's son out of town. She hadn't mentioned a word of this conference to me yet, but there it was on the calendar as if it were official. A chill ran through me. An entire weekend out of town? This had all the hallmarks of a planned romantic getaway under the guise of work. We'd attended plenty of work conferences together in the past. Usually she was eager to tell me details. The fact that this was penciled in without discussion was telling. I snapped a photo of the calendar entry with my phone. If confrontation came, I wanted no chance for her to erase or change it. By the time I stepped out of the office, I'd compiled a small trove of evidence. Phone logs, credit card statements, that calendar entry, and my own notes on upcoming events. My hands were still shaking, but now from adrenaline. The initial pain of betrayal was hardening into determination and cold fury. I checked the time. I was due at my own job soon, an accounting firm downtown, but there was no way I could concentrate on spreadsheets and audits today. I called my office manager and took a personal day, vaguely mentioning a family emergency. In a sense, that wasn't a lie at all. With the day free, I could do more groundwork. One thought kept bubbling up. Should I hire a private investigator? The idea had crossed my mind in the restless hours of the night. Now that I had confirmation of Colin's involvement and a likely schedule for their trysts, a PI could gather irrefutable evidence like photographs or video, which might be useful in divorce proceedings. And yes, I was already thinking of divorce. My heart squeezed painfully at that thought, but I shook it off. If she was betraying me this deeply, our marriage was effectively over. It was just a matter of the formalities and fallout now. I didn't know any investigators personally, but a quick online search turned up a handful of local firms. I jotted down 2 numbers and made some calls from the privacy of my car. The first investigator I spoke to sounded sympathetic, but said he was booked up for a couple weeks, too long to wait. The second, a woman named Marjorie at a small detective agency, listened as I tersely explained that I suspected my wife's affair and already had initial evidence. She asked a few pointed questions. Did I know the other man's name? Did I have likely times and places they'd meet? I answered what I could. Marjorie then said, "We can certainly document what's going on, Mr. Miller. We have a standard infidelity package, photographs, a written report, and if needed, we can testify in court. Sounds like you have some leads we can use. We could start surveillance as early as tonight if that works for you." Tonight. That lined up perfectly with Steph's working late plans. "Yes," I said, perhaps too eagerly. I cleared my throat. "Yes, I'd like that." She said she'll be at work late, but I have reason to believe she'll actually be meeting this man. They sometimes go to a restaurant downtown called Le Baron, and there's a chance they might head to a hotel after. Marjorie took note. "Understood. We'll have 2 investigators available to follow discreetly and get photo-video evidence. Could you email us a recent photo of your wife and the man, if you have one?" I had a decent candid photo of Steph on my phone from a few weeks ago. As for Colin, I realized I had something there too. At the last holiday party for her firm, spouses had been invited, and I vaguely remembered meeting a tall guy with sandy hair named Colin. I'd snapped a few photos that night. Digging through my cloud albums, I found him in a group shot with my wife and others. He had an arm loosely around her waist in the photo, friendly enough at the time, but now it made my skin crawl. Yes, I had Colin's face. "I do. I'll send you both images," I replied, voice tight. We settled the fees and formalities. Steep, but I didn't care about the cost right now. I hung up and immediately sent off an email with pictures of Stephanie and Colin, along with details, their workplace addresses, vehicle descriptions, Steph's blue Honda, and what I remembered of Colin's car, a gray BMW sedan he usually parked near, the back of her office lot. I also mentioned that tonight 7 p.m. at Le Baron was my best guess for their rendezvous, based on a hunch and those credit card charges. With that major step taken, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. Things were in motion. If all went well, by tomorrow, I'd have concrete evidence beyond my own observations. Evidence that would hold up in any courtroom, or frankly, evidence that would strip away any shred of denial Steph might have. But I wasn't done for the day. There was another professional I needed to consult, a lawyer. If my marriage was about to implode, I had to be prepared legally. I dialed the number of an attorney my brother had used during his divorce 2 years ago. Elliot Finch was his name. My brother had spoken highly of him, saying Elliot was a shark in the courtroom but a decent guy outside of it. I hoped that assessment was accurate. A receptionist put me through to Elliot after a brief wait. "Elliot Finch speaking," came a smooth voice. "Mr. Finch, my name is Daniel Miller," I began, suddenly feeling the weight of this becoming real as I said it aloud. I'm afraid I need to consult about a divorce, potentially." He got down to business immediately, setting an initial consultation for Monday morning at 9 a.m. I thanked him and hung up, the conversation brief but reassuringly all business. It felt premature to book a divorce lawyer before confronting my wife, but I knew better than to approach this unprepared or emotionally raw. If things went the way I suspected, I'd be grateful to have someone ready to defend my interests and our kids. By early afternoon, everything was set. A PI team would tail Steph tonight, and I had a legal meeting lined up. My evidence file was growing. All that remained for the day was the hardest part, playing the oblivious husband until the hammer could fall. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a restless daze around the house, checking the time every few minutes, imagining what might unfold that evening. I busied myself by gathering personal documents, our marriage certificate, the deed to the house, bank records, and securing them in a locked file cabinet. I also started a list of assets and accounts, recalling advice I'd heard that one should inventory things in case a vengeful spouse tried to hide or take them. Every so often, I wondered if I was going overboard. Maybe she would sense something was off and tonight wouldn't yield anything incriminating. But then I'd recall her laughter at the phone last night, or that hotel charge, or the lies about Ashley, and any hesitation evaporated. I needed the truth, and I was almost certain what that truth was. By 5:30 p.m., I got a text from Steph. "Don't wait up for dinner. I'll be home late, maybe around 10 or 11. Love you." The audacity of those words sent a spike of anger through me. I swallowed it down and replied simply, "Okay, be safe." My fingers itched to add something biting like, "Say hi to Colin," but I resisted. Soon enough, they'd get what's coming. As dusk settled, I left the house. I told myself it was just to avoid sitting there stewing, but truthfully, I wanted to be on the scene as backup to whatever the PIs captured. I wasn't going to interfere, just observe from a distance if I could. I parked a block away from Le Baron, a nice French bistro downtown, around 6:45 p.m. It was a popular spot for both business dinners and date nights. I stayed in my car, engine off, hat pulled low to look inconspicuous. Sure enough, at 7:05, I spotted Stephanie's blue Honda pull up to the valet stand at the restaurant entrance. My heart kicked into a gallop. She stepped out looking every bit as polished as she had this morning, maybe with a touch of lipstick freshly applied. She handed her keys to the valet and walked inside alone, her posture prim, purse clutched at her side. A minute later, a gray BMW rolled up. Even at a distance in the twilight, I recognized the driver who stepped out. Tall, sandy-haired Colin, dressed in a sharp blazer with no tie. He seemed to exude confidence, or maybe that was just my rage tinting my perception. He strode in after her. I noticed a dark sedan with tinted windows parked along the street nearby, likely the PI's Marjorie sent. I had given them our car descriptions and the locale. It was good to see them in position. For the next 2 hours, I waited. At one point, I left my car and took a brief walk past the restaurant, peering in through the elegant floor-to-ceiling windows. There they were, seated at a small corner table, wine glasses in hand. Steph was laughing at something Colin had said, her head tilted in that flirtatious way I knew so well. Colin reached across and lightly touched her hand on the table. She didn't pull away. The sight was like a punch to the gut, even though I'd anticipated it. I felt a flash of hurt and anger so intense I almost marched through those doors right then. But I caught myself. Not yet. Get it documented first. I saw one of the investigators, a wiry man with a camera slung casually like a tourist, sitting at the bar, angling his phone as if texting but likely snapping photos or recording video. Professional, discreet. Steph and Colin seemed oblivious. I forced myself to keep walking, turning the corner and circling back to my car. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. I took slow breaths. You knew it, you expected it, I reminded myself, but it didn't fully dull the pain. Around 9 p.m., they emerged. I slouched down as far as possible in my seat. Stephanie was holding onto Colin's arm, her body language intimate and familiar. They waited for the valet to bring his BMW around. He opened her door and she slid in, smiling. A real gentleman. I nearly cracked a tooth grinding my jaw at that display. As Colin walked around to the driver's side, I saw the camera flash once, quick and subtle, from the sedan up the street, the PI capturing a final shot of them together. I tailed at a safe distance as Colin's car pulled away from the restaurant. Sure enough, they headed straight for the highway out of downtown. My heart thumped. I suspected where they were going. The Grand Oak Inn was a boutique hotel off the next exit, the same one I'd seen in our credit card statements. They took the exit. I hung back watching their taillights barely breathing. Colin's BMW turned into the well-lit entrance of the Grand Oak Inn. I cruised by on the street, glimpsing them both stepping out under the portico. Colin tossed his keys to another valet. Steph stood close to him, and even through my red haze, I could see she looked excited, happy. The man at her side, not me, placed a hand on the small of her back as they went through the doors into the lobby. I wanted to scream, to run them down, to do something. Instead, I drove on past, not daring to pull in and risk being seen. This part I'd leave entirely to the investigators. One of the sedan's headlights flashed on as soon as the BMW turned in, then off again. I figured one PI had gotten out to follow on foot. I pulled over at a gas station a block away, chest heaving as if I'd run miles. I felt hot tears at the corners of my eyes and cursed myself for that perceived weakness. Punching the steering wheel, I let out a growl of frustration that thankfully nobody but me could hear inside the car. It's real, I thought, as the pain of reality settled coldly over me. Seeing them with my own eyes left no doubt. My wife was spending the night in a hotel with another man. When I had steadied myself, I texted Marjorie. She had provided her number for updates. Saw them enter Grand Oak Inn. You're 9:30. Assuming your team got it. Call me tomorrow with results. She responded almost immediately. We did. We'll be in touch. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I scoffed aloud at the message, not out of anger at her, but at the absurdity of this situation where a stranger felt pity for my plight. I didn't want pity. I wanted payback. I sat there for another 15 minutes trying to calm down enough to drive home safely. Eventually, I managed. On the way, I began formulating the next steps in my plan. The evidence was basically in hand. Soon I'd have photographic proof of her adultery. Once I had that, I could confront her and ensure there was no room for her to wiggle free with excuses or lies. The drive gave me time to think clearly about how to maximize the consequences for this betrayal. Adultery might be a personal sin, but it could have legal and financial repercussions as well. My lawyer meeting Monday would clarify how best to deploy this evidence. In our state, I knew that proving adultery could influence alimony and even custody of Jason if it came to a fight. And if Colin was also married, oh Colin. Suddenly I remembered. Colin had a wife, Vanessa, if I recalled correctly, from that company Christmas party introduction. She was a pretty brunette with a bright smile. Did she have any clue? Possibly not if Colin was as deceitful to her as Steph was to me. She deserved to know. A part of me hesitated. Was it my place to upend another person's life with this news? But then again, her life was likely already being upended behind her back. She might become an ally, or at least she should hear it from me with evidence rather than discovering on her own without support. I made a mental note to contact Vanessa soon, perhaps after I had the PI's report in hand, so I could break it to her as gently as possible, if such a thing is even possible. When I got back home around 10 p.m., the house was dark and silent. I realized bitterly that if I'd stayed home like a good little husband, I would have been sitting here alone, waiting while my wife sent me cheerful lies via text. The thought made me sick. I couldn't bear to sleep in our bed that night. Instead, I lay on this living room couch with the TV quietly playing some late-night talk show that I didn't really watch. My mind churned with everything that had happened and everything that was to come. Around 12:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was another text from Stephanie. Still at the office. Gonna crash at Ashley's place since it's so late. See you tomorrow. Love you. The rage that flared up was almost unbearable. Lies on lies. I had watched her enter a hotel with him hours ago, and she still had the gall to text me updates about her fictitious night at the office. I took a deep breath, then another. I did not reply. Instead, I saved the message, another piece of evidence of her deceit. Let her think I was asleep. I barely slept at all that night. Between adrenaline and anguish, rest wouldn't come. But rather than dwell in sorrow, I forced myself to plan. Lying there in the dark, I mentally sketched out each step of the retribution I would deliver. There would be a divorce, and I'd ensure it left her in the worst position possible. Financially, legally, socially, I wanted her to feel the full weight of her actions. And Colin? If I had any say, he would pay dearly too. He had a family of his own he was betraying, and a career that might be vulnerable if his employer frowned on managers sleeping with subordinates. I resolved to look into that angle. Many companies had ethics clauses or non-fraternization policies. If he was her boss, he could be in deep professional trouble once this affair saw daylight. The darkness slowly gave way to the gray light of dawn. I got up, bones aching from the couch, but my resolve stronger than ever. Today would be the day I set the plan in full motion. Saturday, the confrontation. Saturday morning, I was brewing my second pot of coffee when I heard the familiar creak of the front door. Stephanie stepped in quietly, trying to close it softly as if not to wake anyone. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, wrinkled blouse, skirt, and heels in hand. Her hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes as though she hadn't slept much. Maybe she hadn't, I thought bitterly. Busy night, after all. I stood in the kitchen archway, coffee mug in hand, watching her tiptoe in. When she spotted me, she froze for a split second. I saw panic flash in her eyes before she quickly masked it. Morning, I said, voice neutral. I raised my mug in a semblance of normalcy. Coffee? Steph swallowed and set her heels down by the door. Good morning. Sure, I could use some. She attempted a casual smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She walked over and I poured her a cup. As I handed it to her, I noticed her hands trembling. Good, I thought. She should be nervous. How was Ashley's? I asked lightly, meeting her gaze over the rim of my mug as I sipped. The question hung in the air like a loaded wire. She almost flinched at the name of her friend. Oh, it was fine. You know, we were both exhausted from working, so we crashed on our couch for a few hours. She avoided my eyes, blowing on the hot coffee. Sorry I didn't come home. I know I should have, but... I forced a tight smile and shook my head. It's okay. I just wish you'd called. I was worried. I let a hint of hurt seep into my voice, her eyes flicked to my face, gauging. I'm sorry, she said again quickly. She reached out and touched my arm. I didn't mean to worry you, Dan. It was just so late when we finished I figured you'd be asleep and it was easier to stay. It won't happen again. Instinct almost made me jerk away, but I allowed the contact for now. It took all my willpower not to recoil from her touch. Instead, I spoke quietly. You were working late again, huh? She nodded too eagerly. We had to finalize that big report and practice the pitch a couple times. It went well, though, I think. The client was happy. She offered a tight, nervous smile and took a sip of coffee. Client was happy, I echoed softly, staring at my own reflection in the dark brew of my mug. I gave a slow nod. That's good. Hard work paid off then. There must have been something in my tone or face at that moment, because I saw Stephanie bite her lip and furrow her brow. Dan, are you okay? You seem upset. I took a deep breath. The confrontation was coming. I could feel the words burning in my throat, but I didn't want to explode in fury. I needed to do this carefully. I set my mug down on the counter deliberately. Am I okay? I repeated. I looked up and met her gaze, letting silence linger for a beat. I'm not sure, Steph. You tell me. Is there something I should know? Something you want to tell me? Her eyes widened, and just as quickly she cast them down. I don't know what you mean, she stammered, a tremor in her voice betraying her. She attempted a dismissive chuckle that came out strained. I already said sorry for not coming home. I know I should have, but that's not what I mean, I interrupted softly. My heart was pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. I watched her closely as she fidgeted with the coffee mug. Her knuckles were white against the ceramic. What do you mean, then? She asked in barely more than a whisper, still staring at the floor. I inhaled slowly. Part of me wanted to give her one last chance to come clean, to salvage a scrap of honesty between us. I mean, I said, enunciating carefully, is there anything about you and someone else that you need to tell me? Anything you've been doing that might be, oh, I don't know, betraying my trust? Betraying our family? There was no mistaking my meaning now. The color drained from Stephanie's face. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her breathing grew shallow and rapid. Dan, what are you talking about? She tried, with a weak, brittle laugh. There's nothing. I'm talking about Colin, I said cold and clear. The mug slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the countertop, coffee splashing over the rim. Steph gasped and jumped back as it tipped over, spilling coffee across the granite. She looked from the mess to me, her face a mask of shock and guilt. For a moment, we both just stood there, coffee running over the edge of the counter and dripping onto the floor. She stared at me, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. She stammered finally, her voice barely audible. She looked like a trapped animal. I stepped forward, ignoring the puddle of coffee spreading across the tiles. My voice dropped low, each word measured and dripping with quiet fury. I know everything, Stephanie. I know you've been lying to me for months. I know about the dinners, the hotel, the affair. So drop the act. It's over. Her trembling hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Dan! The tears that had been brimming in her eyes finally spilled over, rolling down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. Sorry? I barked out a short, humorless laugh, unable to contain the bitterness. You're sorry? What exactly are you sorry for? Sorry that you cheated, or sorry that you got caught? She flinched as if I'd struck her. I'm sorry for all of it, she cried, voice cracking. It was a mistake. It just happened. I never meant to hurt you. Never meant to hurt me? I repeated incredulously, my temper rising despite my resolve to stay calm. For 6 months, while I was cooking you dinner, taking care of our kids, kissing you goodnight, you were screwing another man, your boss no less, behind my back. You hid it. You lied to my face every single day. Don't stand there and tell me you never meant to hurt me, Steph. What did you think would happen if I found out? She sobbed into her hands, mascara starting to smear. I don't know. I wasn't thinking. She looked up desperately, stepping closer. Dan, it didn't mean anything. It was just, I was stupid and lonely, and he paid attention to me, and I made a horrible mistake. Multiple horrible mistakes. I corrected, my voice ice. It wasn't one night, it was a continuous, calculated betrayal. You don't accidentally carry on an affair for months. You made hundreds of conscious choices to lie and sneak around. She shook her head rapidly, reaching out as if to touch me. Please, please, you have to believe me. It was never about not loving you. I do love you. I always have. I stepped back out of her reach, holding up a hand. Don't. Just don't. My voice came out a tremble of disgust. I didn't want her touching me ever again. Stephanie's face crumpled. Dan, please. Let's talk about this. We can fix this. I stared at her in disbelief. Fix this? Are you serious? I almost choked on the words. There's no fixing us, Stephanie. You blew up our marriage the moment you decided to spread your legs for Colin. The vulgarity of my own words hung in the air, but I didn't regret them. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the disgust and hurt I felt. She wailed as if slapped and collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs, face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs. It wasn't like that, she moaned between her fingers. I didn't want to lose you. I was confused, and it just got out of control. My whole body was shaking now. I took another deep breath, trying to steady myself. Out of control, I repeated quietly. No, Steph. You knew exactly what you were doing. And you didn't stop. Not until you got caught. She lifted her head, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and looked at me with pleading eyes. I ended it, she blurted suddenly. Just this week, I told him we had to stop. The conference next weekend. I was going to cancel it. I swear I was going to end it. I narrowed my eyes. Was that true or just another desperate lie? It hardly mattered now. What do you want, a medal? I asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. You want credit for belatedly deciding to maybe not screw him again? Right before a romantic weekend you planned behind my back? Forgive me if I don't congratulate you. She opened her mouth, then shut it, realizing perhaps how absurd it sounded. She wrung her hands in together, tears pattering the tiled floor. I know I'm asking a lot, she said quietly, but if you could find it in your heart to forgive me, for the kids, for us, I'll do anything. Counseling, a post-nup, whatever it takes. Just please, please don't leave me. This was the first time she explicitly acknowledged fear of consequences. Don't leave me. I watched her for a long moment. This once confident, beautiful woman, now reduced to a trembling mess in our kitchen. A part of me, the part that had loved her for so many years, felt a tug of sorrow at the sight. But then I remembered the images of her with Colin. The way she smiled at him, touched him. The memory was like a douse of gasoline on the dying embers of my anger. I walked around the table and pulled out a chair across from her. I sat down, hands clasped tightly in front of me. "Look at me," I said calmly. Sniffling, she raised her eyes to meet mine. They were bloodshot and filled with fear. "I want you to be very clear on where I stand," I said in an eerily even tone. "There is no world in which I stay married to you after this." "None." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a finger sharply. "Listen, our marriage is over. You killed it. The trust is gone. The love—" My voice caught slightly. I pushed forward. "The love died the moment I watched you walk into that hotel with him." Stephanie's face went ashen. You were there?" I gave a single, sharp nod. "I saw you. I also hired investigators. I have photos, timestamps, everything. So don't insult me with any more lies." I reached into the folder I had prepared early this morning, full of printed evidence. I tossed a handful of 8 by 10 color photographs onto the table like I was dealing cards. In one, she was at Le Baron, candlelight illuminating her smiling face as she gazed across the table at Colin. In another, he was ushering her into the Grand Oak Inn, his hand on her lower back. The images were crystal clear. Stephanie stared at them in horror, her hand flying to her mouth again. "Oh God," I continued, inexorable. I slid the printed text logs and credit card statement toward her. "Here's your entire affair in black and white. Phone records of your late-night chats with him. Charges for fancy dinners and a hotel when you were supposedly working. And here," I slapped the photo of our calendar with the conference on it. "A little getaway you penciled in for the two of you next weekend. What's the matter? Did he promise you a romantic trip? A reward for lying to your family so well?" She tore her eyes from the evidence and looked at me with pure desperation. "Dan, please," she whispered, voice raw. "What are you going to do?" I leaned forward, folding my hands together. This part I had rehearsed. "First, you're going to write a statement for me," I said, keeping my tone businesslike, even as she blinked in confusion. "In your own words, you will confess to this affair. You will acknowledge that you initiated it with Colin, that it was fully consensual, and that it lasted for the past 6 or so months. You'll state that you used marital funds for it, like that hotel stay and those dinners. You will apologize for betraying me and the kids, and then you will sign it." Her eyes widened further. Why? Why do you want me to write that?" "Because I want it in writing," I said bluntly. "Think of it as insurance for me. If you truly mean you're sorry and you'll do anything to make it up, then start with complete honesty on paper. If you ever try to twist the story later, like telling people I drove you to it or some nonsense, I'll have your own signed words to counter that. And legally, it'll come in handy in the divorce." Steph inhaled sharply at the word divorce and began to cry again. "Please, Dan, maybe we can separate for a while or try counseling." I slammed my palm on the table, causing her to yelp and jump. "Stop, just stop," I growled, struggling to keep my voice low. "You destroyed my trust. I'm not interested in therapy or temporary separations. We're done. I'm filing for divorce on grounds of adultery, and I will not consider any alternative." Her face crumpled, but I continued mercilessly. "The only thing to discuss now is how we handle the details, and whether you want to do this the easy way or the hard way." She wiped her eyes with a shaking hand. What's the easy way?" she asked, voice small. I ticked off points on my fingers. "The easy way is you cooperate. You sign the confession I just described. You agree not to contest the divorce or drag this out. We negotiate a fair settlement, fair to me and the kids, that is. No outrageous demands. Given your actions, you shouldn't expect much beyond the bare minimum of what the law might grant you." She bowed her head, tears dripping onto the photos of her own infidelity spread before her. And the hard way," she whispered. I met her gaze with a steely one of my own. The hard way is I unleash hell. I will use every piece of evidence to ensure you come out of this with nothing more than what you brought into the marriage. I'll subpoena Colin. Drag your dirty laundry into open court. I'll inform every person who matters to you exactly why this marriage ended. Your parents, our friends, hell, even Colin's boss if I have to. If you want to fight, I promise you I'll fight harder, and I will win. I have ample proof of your wrongdoing, and I doubt you want all of it becoming a public spectacle. Stephanie stared at me, stricken. I could see the realization creeping in. She was cornered. Years ago, she used to lovingly joke that I was slow to anger but impossible to budge once I set my mind on something. She was witnessing that truth now in its darkest form. Think about it, I said more softly. If you really care about the kids, you won't turn this into a war. They don't need to hear us slinging mud in court. The facts are the facts. You cheated on me. It's as open and shut as it gets. She hiccuped through a sob, then nodded, seeming to deflate entirely. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do what you ask. A part of me felt an unexpected pang of something like sadness at how defeated and small she looked just then. This was the woman I'd loved most of my life, now a broken figure in our kitchen. But I steeled myself. She did this to herself, I reminded internally. Actions have consequences. I retrieved a pen and a pad of paper from the drawer and placed them in front of her. Right, I said. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen. She hesitated, pen hovering over the page. Dan, could you ever someday forgive me? She asked in a tiny voice, not lifting her eyes from the blank paper. I stared at the top of her head, at her once meticulously styled hair now in disarray. In that moment, I felt nothing but emptiness where my love for her had been. This isn't about forgiveness right now, I replied quietly. It's about consequences and moving forward. Let's just get through this. Whether I can ever forgive, I can't even think about that. She choked back a sob and nodded. Then she began to write. Her sobs quieted as she focused on forming the words. It took her several minutes, during which I stood up and grabbed some paper towels to mop up the spilled coffee. The mundane act of cleaning giving me something to do, some semblance of control in this surreal moment. When she finally set the pen down, she slid the pad toward me. I picked it up and read, My name is Stephanie Miller. I am writing this statement of my own free will on today's date. I confess that I have committed adultery during my marriage to Daniel Miller. Specifically, I engaged in an extramarital affair with my coworker and manager, Colin R. She wrote his full last name. This affair began approximately 6 months ago and continued until today's date. I deceived my husband and children throughout this period. We met multiple times, including at Le Baron restaurant and Grand Oak Inn for a sexual relationship. I used household funds, to facilitate this affair. Dinners, hotel. My actions were selfish, immoral, and wrong. There was no fault by Daniel that justified my behavior. I take full responsibility for betraying him and damaging our family. I regret my actions deeply and apologize to Dan, Megan, and Jason for the pain I've caused. I will accept the consequences of my infidelity. Her signature scrawled at the bottom. It was thorough and honest, perhaps because I had essentially dictated what it needed to include. But seeing it in her handwriting, a permanent record of the truth, brought a grim satisfaction. Thank you, I said, tearing the page carefully from the pad. I blew on the ink to ensure it dried, then folded the paper and tucked it into my folder with the other evidence. Stephanie watched me, her eyes hollow and red. What now? She asked dully. I looked at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face. Now you pack a bag, I said firmly, pushing down any lingering pity. I want you out of this house, at least for now. Go stay with a friend, or maybe Colin has a spare room. I don't care, but I can't have you here. The sight of you, I paused, then finished bluntly. The sight of you makes me sick. Fresh tears glistened in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She merely nodded. If that's what you need. It is, I said. I need space to think and for things to be calm, at least for Jason's sake. Our son was fortunately out at his Saturday morning part-time job, unaware of the drama unfolding at home. Mentioning Jason made her flinch. What are we going to tell him? And Megan, she whispered, voice dripping with shame. Dan, please. I know they'll hate me, but can we at least tell them together, gently? I don't want. I'm not lying to our kids for you. I snapped more harshly than I intended at her attempt to negotiate. I took a breath, steadying myself. They deserve the truth. They're old enough to understand what an affair is. Megan is 20. Jason's 18 in a couple months. I won't cover this up. If they ask, I'm telling them straight. She let out a broken sigh. I know, I can't bear the thought of them looking at me with disgust. Should have thought of that sooner, I said, not unkindly, but bluntly. That's one of the consequences. She broke into fresh sobs, but I'd had enough. I'm going to step outside for a few minutes, I said, standing up. You should go upstairs and pack whatever you need for a week or so. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Steph nodded weakly, head bowed. I left her at the kitchen table and stepped out the back door into the yard, inhaling the cold morning air in huge gulps. My hands were shaking violently now that I was out of her sight. I forced myself to release the tension in my shoulders, shaking out my arms. It was done. The confrontation I had dreaded was over, and I had won, insofar as one can win in such a scenario. She was going to comply, to slink away with her tail between her legs. So why did I feel like I wanted to throw up? After a few minutes, I re-entered the house. Stephanie had gone upstairs, as instructed. I heard dresser drawers opening and closing, the muted sounds of her packing echoing down. I went to the living room and collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. My composure wavered now that I was alone. A ragged sob escaped my throat, anger and grief mingling as a physical pain in my chest. I scrubbed at my eyes fiercely, unwilling to completely fall apart. Not yet. Eventually, I wiped my face and stood. I needed to call our daughter Megan and tell her something before rumor or her mother got to her. And Jason. God, Jason would be home soon expecting lunch and a normal Saturday. I decided I'd tell them separately, and soon. No point delaying and creating more lies. Just then, Steph came down the stairs, dragging a small rolling suitcase and carrying a duffel bag over her shoulder. Her face was pale and drawn, eyes puffy. She had wiped away her ruined makeup and pulled her hair back into a low ponytail. She paused near the base of the stairs, avoiding my eyes. I'll go to my mom's, she murmured. She's out of state visiting Aunt Carol right now, but I have a key. I'll stay there, so I can be nearby for the kids if they want to see me. I simply nodded. That was actually convenient. Her parents' house was a few miles away and empty, so she wouldn't be at Colin's or crying on a friend's couch gossiping. It kept things contained for now. She lingered by the door, eyes roving around the house, perhaps her last look at the home we had built together. Her gaze landed on a framed photo on the entryway table, our family beach portrait from 2 summers ago, all 4 of us smiling with sunburned noses. She stared at it and fresh tears welled. I really am, she began softly. Don't, I cut in, shaking my head. Just go. Her face crumpled once more, but she bit her lip and nodded. Without another word, she opened the front door and wheeled her suitcase out onto the porch. I didn't follow her out. I stood in the doorway, watching as she walked to her car. She loaded the bags into the trunk, then stood there holding the door handle, looking back at me with an expression so forlorn it might have melted another man's heart. I simply looked back, impassive. She opened her mouth as if to call something out to me. I waited, but she thought better of it. Shoulders sagging, she got into her car. A moment later, the engine started and she backed out of the driveway. I watched until her car disappeared down the street. I closed the door and locked it, then pressed my forehead against the wood. For a moment, I just stood there in the silent foyer, shaking from adrenaline and heartbreak and grim triumph all at once. It was done. The house felt immense and empty around me. Everything was eerily quiet now except for the ticking of the clock in the hall. I let out a long breath and pushed off the door. Time to take care of the next most important order of business. My children. I went into the living room and picked up my phone. Megan was away at college, but only a 2-hour drive off. Better she hear this in person, I thought. I dialed her number and she answered after a few rings, sounding groggy. Likely I'd woken her. Hey, Dad, what's up? Everything okay? Normally I'd exchange some small talk, ask about her classes or weekend plans, but I couldn't manage it. My voice caught in my throat on the first try. On the second, I managed to say hoarsely, "Meg, I need you to come home for a day or two, sweetheart. As soon as you can." Her immediate alarm was palpable. "Dad, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is it Jason? Mom?" She fired off concerns in rapid succession. I closed my eyes. "I'm okay. Your brother is okay. It's—" My voice nearly failed again. "It's about Mom and me. Something's happened. I I think it's best discussed in person. Can you drive home today?" There was a pause, then her tone turned fearfully resolute. "I'll be there by noon. Dad, just hang on, okay? I'll be there." She hung up before I could respond. I put the phone down and let out a shaky breath. I hadn't intended to scare her so much with my vagueness, but how else to convey the urgency? She likely suspected something grave. Maybe not exactly what, but she knew it was serious. Next was Jason. That one was trickier because he was going to walk through the door any minute, expecting normalcy. I thought about trying to delay telling him until Megan arrived so we could do it together. But he deserved to know immediately too, especially with his mom suddenly absent. Within minutes, I heard Jason's old Honda pull into the driveway. The front door opened and he strolled in, cheeks pink from the cold, still in his work uniform polo. He gave me a grin as he kicked off his sneakers. "Hey, Dad, I'm starving. Want to do sandwiches or something for lunch?" He trailed off as he really looked at me. I must have had a telltale expression, or maybe the house's atmosphere gave it away. His smile faded into a concerned frown. "Dad, you okay?" I motioned for him to join me on the couch. "Come sit, son." Now he was definitely worried. He followed me, eyes darting around. "Where's Mom?" I took a deep breath. This was going to hurt. I sat him down and put a hand on his shoulder. "Jason, I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to be very hard to hear." His body had gone tense under my hand. He looked at me with wide, anxious eyes. I decided to just rip the Band-Aid off. "Your mom has been having an affair," I said, voice as steady as I could manage. "She's been seeing another man behind my back for some time." I confronted her, and she admitted it. "She's gone for now, and I've told her I'm going to divorce her." He just stared at me as if I'd started speaking another language. "What?" he breathed. He blinked rapidly, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. "No, no, that's crazy. Mom wouldn't, she'd never—" I squeezed his shoulder gently, feeling my heart break anew. "I'm so sorry, but it's true. I have proof. It's Colin, the guy from her work. She's been lying to us." I saw it land then. His face changed from denial to shock to blossoming anger in the span of seconds. "Mom cheated on you?" he said, voice rising with fury on the last word. He shot to his feet, shrugging my hand off. "With that Colin guy? Are you kidding me?" I stood as well, reaching toward him. "Jason, this is bullshit," he exploded, eyes wet with angry tears. "She wouldn't do that to us. There's got to be some mistake." "I'm sorry," I repeated softly. "I wish there was. I saw her with him, son. I have pictures." She admitted it to me not even an hour ago. My own eyes were stinging, but I blinked it away. Jason paced a tight circle, hands clenched in his hair. How could she do this?" His voice cracked painfully. You're the best dad, the best husband. Everyone says so. What was she thinking?" I had no good answer. I sat back down, motioning for him to join me. "I don't know, buddy. She said it just happened. And she was lonely, but that's nonsense. There's no excuse." He remained standing, breathing hard. Then, to my shock, he cocked back his fist and slammed it into the drywall by the entryway. The plaster dented under the blow. He didn't even seem to notice the pain, just rested his fist against the wall, shoulders shaking. "That stupid, selfish—" "How could she do this to us?" he yelled, voice raw with betrayal. I quickly went over and put an arm around him, gently tugging him away from the wall. I know, I murmured. "Come here." He resisted for a half-second, then turned and hugged me fiercely. I held onto him as his body shook. I wasn't sure if he was crying. His face was pressed against my shoulder and his breaths were ragged. I felt my own tears soaking into his hair as I rubbed his back. We stayed like that for a minute, the only sound our labored breathing. Finally, he pulled back and wiped his face roughly with his sleeve. His knuckles were scraped and already bruising from punching the wall. I guided him to the couch and sat him down. "She's gone?" he asked after a long silence, staring at the floor. I nodded. I asked her to stay at Grandma's for now. I couldn't have her here, and she agreed. Megan's driving home. We'll talk it all out together when she gets here, okay? Jason just nodded numbly. Then, out of nowhere, he slammed his palm on the coffee table, making me jump. Damn it, he spat. I don't want to see Mom. I don't even want to look at her right now. You don't have to until you're ready, I assured him. Swallowing past the lump in my throat, he closed his eyes tightly. I feel like an idiot. I noticed Mom was kinda distant lately, but I figured it was work stress. I never thought. He trailed off, shaking his head. Me neither, I said quietly. I missed the signs for a long time too. Don't blame yourself. He sniffed hard and looked up at me, eyes red. Are you okay, Dad? That question undid me more than anything. I managed a shaky smile. I will be. It hurts like hell, but I'm glad I know the truth now. And I'm glad I still have you and your sister. We're gonna be okay, I promise. He set his jaw. Yeah, we are. We don't need her if she's gonna do this. Screw her, I gently corrected. You don't have to decide anything about your relationship with Mom right now. You're hurt and angry. That's normal. Just give it time. You can still love her and be furious at her at the same time. Jason looked down. I don't know what I feel. I love Mom, but I really hate her too right now, Dad. I put a hand on the back of his neck, squeezing softly. I know, son. We sat together in silence, both trying to process. After a while, he muttered, Megan's gonna flip out. I know, I sighed. She'll be here soon. Do you want to be the one to tell her? Or should I? You do it, he said immediately. I can't. Okay. I looked at his bruised knuckles. You should put some ice on your hand. He followed my gaze and flexed his fingers as if just realizing what he'd done. Oh, he shrugged. It's fine. I went to the freezer, got a few ice cubes in a dish towel, and brought it to him. He accepted it wordlessly and pressed it to his swelling knuckles. We didn't say much else until Megan arrived, which was around 11:45 a.m., earlier than expected. I suspect she sped the whole way, fueled by anxiety. Jason and I watched her pull in and practically sprint to the door. I opened it as she was fumbling with her keys. Megan took one look at me and Jason standing there and burst into tears. Oh my God, what happened? She cried, dropping her weekend bag and rushing to hug me. I held her tightly, and Jason joined the embrace. Come inside, I whispered. We guided her to the couch. She was shaking and kept asking, What is it? Is someone sick? Is someone dead? Please, just tell me. I knelt in front of her and took her hands. Jason sat beside her, staring at the floor, jaw clenched. Megan, I said gently, your mom did something. She made a terrible choice. She's been having an affair with a man from her work. Megan's face went blank. She blinked rapidly, as if she hadn't heard right. What? Mom cheated on Dad, Jason muttered, unable to dress it up. Megan jerked her head to look at him, then back to me. No, she wouldn't. She began shaking her head vigorously, tears flying. Daddy, that can't. Tell me that's not true. My eyes welled up seeing her use that childhood name. I squeezed her hands. I'm so sorry, honey, it's true. I found out for sure yesterday. I confronted her this morning. She admitted it. Megan made a noise somewhere between a sob and a scream. She yanked her hands away from mine and stood up pacing, just as her brother had. How could she? She looked at us wild-eyed. With who? That Colin guy? I nodded. Yes. She threw her head back and actually yelled, Damn! Then she rounded on me, face contorted with hurt. And you're divorcing her, right? Please tell me you are. I am, I assured immediately. I told her I would be. Good, she spat, then dissolved into tears again. Jason stood and put an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, crying. I can't believe she did this, she choked out. Our mom, how could she throw everything away like this? Jason's eyes were shining too, but he kept his voice steady for her. I know. It's messed up. She lied to all of us. Megan pulled away and dashed her tears angrily with her sleeve. Where is she? Did you kick her out? What did she say? I explained as gently as possible that I had asked Mom to leave for now, and that she was extremely remorseful and wanted to apologize to them, but understood they might need time. I also mentioned the confession she wrote, and that we would be moving forward legally. I don't care about her apologies, Megan said bitterly. She wrecked everything. Does Grandma know? Not yet, I said. But she probably will soon, since Steph went there. I plan to call your grandparents later today, but I wanted to tell you two first. Megan nodded, wiping her nose. Then she looked at me with sudden worry. Are you okay? What can I do? I forced a smile. I'm handling it. Having you both here helps a lot. My voice cracked despite myself. That set Megan crying again, and she came over to hug me fiercely. We're here, Dad. We're not going anywhere. Jason joined, and the three of us huddled in a tearful group embrace in the living room for who knows how long. The rest of the weekend was a blur of long conversations, waves of anger and grief, and a strengthening resolve among the three of us to move forward as a family of three. Both kids oscillated between devastation and fury with their mother. Megan at one point said quietly, I don't know if I have a mom anymore. Not the one I thought I had. Jason simply refused to talk about her at all after that first hour, clamming up whenever her name was mentioned. I kept an eye on both of them, encouraging them to vent and also reminding them, gently, that while their mom had done a horrible thing, she was still their mother and she did love them. They weren't ready to hear that on day one. Fair enough. That evening, I spoke to my in-laws on the phone after Stephanie apparently broke the news to them. They were mortified and apologetic, angry at her on my behalf. Her father insisted on meeting me in person soon to offer support. I appreciated it. Even though it felt strange, Stephanie herself sent a few careful texts to the kids, apologizing and expressing her love, begging them to talk to her when they were ready. Jason ignored his. Megan showed me hers, which said, I know you must be furious and hurt. I'm so sorry, Meggie. I love you more than anything. I hope one day you can forgive me. I'm here if you ever want to talk or yell or anything. Mom. What should I do? Megan asked, scowling at her phone. I shrugged sadly. If you're not ready to reply, you don't have to. Whenever you are, you'll know. She ended up texting back one sentence. I can't talk to you right now. I need time. It was the most measured thing any of us could offer her mother at that point. Over the next few days, I shifted fully into practical mode. Monday morning, I met with Elliot Finch, my lawyer. I laid out all the evidence. He was impressed by the confession in particular. We discussed the game plan. North Carolina requires a year of separation for a divorce, but we could hammer out a separation agreement now to handle finances and custody in the interim. Given that our kids were basically adults, custody wasn't really a big legal issue. Jason was 17, but would be 18 long before any trial, and at his age the courts would heed his preference anyway. The bigger issue was spousal support and asset division. Elliot assured me that since we had comparable incomes and I could prove her adultery, I likely wouldn't owe a dime of alimony. In fact, if anything, she might owe me in an at-fault divorce scenario. I told him I wasn't out to impoverish her, just to ensure I protected myself and didn't reward her betrayal. We decided to propose a clean split of assets leaning heavily in my favor. Your wife will be advised to accept that quietly, given her position, Elliot said. If she fights it, we can absolutely take it to court and she'll likely end up worse off, plus attorney fees. I nodded in agreement. I also mentioned to him that Colin was married, and his wife might pursue an alienation of affection lawsuit against Stephanie. I had spoken to Vanessa on the phone the night before, after giving her a day to process. It was an emotional call. She cried, I comforted, we shared information. She told me she planned to go for blood in her divorce and possibly sue Steph as well. I gave her my full support and promised evidence for her if needed. Elliot raised an eyebrow but said since that would be a civil suit separate from the divorce, it didn't directly affect what we were doing, except that it gave us even more leverage. Stephanie would be in no position to endure multiple legal battles. On his advice, I quickly moved half the remaining money from our joint checking into a new account in my name only, something I'd already done in part before the confrontation in case she tried any financial retaliation. I also canceled our joint credit cards and had new ones reissued in my name only. Steph's lawyer, she retained someone within days, was informed and didn't object, since she had her own accounts to use. By the end of that week, Stephanie, through her lawyer, had essentially capitulated to all our separation terms. She agreed to give me full use of the house. She wasn't interested in living there, and certainly the kids were staying with me. She waived any claim to alimony formally, acknowledging her adultery barred it. We agreed to roughly a 70-30 split of marital assets in my favor, which she didn't contest, probably grateful I didn't push for 90-10 or something more punitive. The truth was, I wasn't trying to leave her destitute. I just wasn't going to let her walk away with half of everything after what she did. If not for the kids, I might have been even harsher, but I knew it was in everyone's interest that she not be financially ruined, so she could at least support herself and have a stable place for the kids to visit her, if they ever wanted to. She found a small two-bedroom apartment not far from her parents' house and moved in by the end of the month. I heard this through her mother. Stephanie and I still weren't speaking directly except via lawyers about the agreement and necessary logistics like picking up her clothes and belongings from the house. She did that one afternoon while I was at work. I made sure not to be there. The PI's final report came in handy in one aspect. At my lawyer's suggestion, I forwarded a copy of it, complete with dates, times, and even some damning photos, to the HR department of Colin and Stephanie's company, anonymously. I knew from Vanessa, who I stayed in contact with, that their company had strict rules against managers fraternizing with subordinates, even consensually, because of liability issues. It was a petty piece of revenge, perhaps, but one I felt fully justified in delivering. Sure enough, within a week of that, Colin was terminated from his job. Vanessa informed me gleefully that he'd been called into a board meeting and summarily fired for gross misconduct and violation of company policy, which in turn tanked any severance package he might have gotten. She also served him with divorce papers. He moved out of their house, or rather was kicked out. And rumor had it he left town shortly after, disgraced and jobless. Good riddance. Stephanie managed to keep her own job, but I suspect it was uncomfortable for her there in the aftermath. Perhaps that was punishment enough on the career front. I doubt she'll be up for any promotions anytime soon. The alienation of affection lawsuit. Vanessa filed against Stephanie moved forward in the background, though I largely stayed out of it aside from providing a statement confirming the affair's impact on our marriage. Facing that on top of everything else, Stephanie ended up agreeing to a settlement with Vanessa by mid-year. She paid Vanessa a significant sum, I heard around $50K, to drop the suit. It likely wiped out a chunk of her savings and maybe her share of what she got in our split. Again, consequence of her actions. Months passed. What had initially been a firestorm began to settle into a new routine. Megan returned to college, but called often to check on me and Jason. Jason finished his senior year of high school, living with me, barely speaking to his mother beyond a few terse texts. He decided to attend a university in-state, one near Megan's, actually. He and I got into a comfortable pattern of talking openly about everything, something that had improved markedly since the confrontation. It was as if, by losing the trust in their mother, both kids doubled down on their trust in me. I made sure to earn it every day. I continued seeing my therapist, a practice I'd started months before at my lawyer's urging, and it helped me process the trauma and anger in a healthy way. I focused on being there for my kids and on rediscovering who I was without the weight of a deceitful spouse. I took up swimming again, started going to a gym, lost about 15 pounds of stress weight. Hell, I even got a new haircut and a wardrobe refresh at my daughter's insistence. By the 1-year mark of our separation, I felt like a different man. Leaner, stronger, more confident than I'd been in years. The final divorce paperwork was almost a formality since our separation agreement covered everything. On a bright spring morning, I went to the courthouse with Elliot and officially ended my marriage in front of a judge who barely looked at us while stamping the decree. Stephanie didn't even attend. She didn't have to, since all was uncontested. It was anticlimactic, but also profoundly liberating. I stepped out of the courthouse into the sunshine as a free man, legally and emotionally. I sent a quick text to both kids, divorce final, we did it. Jason replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Megan replied, proud of you, Dad. Onward and upward indeed. That evening, after a low-key dinner with Jason, Megan was away at school. I found myself sitting on the back patio with a cold beer, watching the sun set over our yard. My yard now, no longer ours. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and new beginnings. I realized I felt at peace. In the past year, I had been through betrayal, rage, sorrow, and vengeance. I had seen my wife of 20 years reduced to a cautionary tale, my marriage reduced to paperwork. I had protected what mattered, my children, my home, my dignity, and exacted a measure of justice on those who wronged me. And yet, As I watched the sky turn orange and pink, I wasn't gloating or reveling. Mostly I felt relief. We survived. My phone buzzed with a text. I checked it, expecting one of the kids, but saw Stephanie's name. She hadn't contacted me directly in months aside from procedural emails. I opened the message. I saw the notice that the divorce is official. I just, I want to say again how sorry I am for everything. You and the kids deserve better. I hope one day you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. Take care of yourself, Dan. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Her number was still saved under Steph from long ago. I hadn't bothered to change it. That little heart next to her name suddenly irritated me. I edited the contact and removed the emoji. Then I hit reply. My fingers hovered, unsure what to type. Did she deserve a response at all? Maybe not, but maybe I needed to give one, for closure. Finally, I tapped out, I got your message. I'm doing okay. The kids are doing okay. I hope you are too. It wasn't forgiveness, nor friendship, just a polite acknowledgement. Perhaps more than she deserved, but I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for me. I wanted to close this chapter with civility, if only so I could fully move on, knowing I upheld my own integrity to the end. She replied within a minute. I'm glad. I miss them. Please tell them that, if appropriate. I truly wish you all the best, Dan. You were a good husband. I'm so sorry I ruined everything. I didn't have anything more to say to that. I locked the phone and set it aside. As dusk settled, I leaned back in my chair and looked at the sky, a deepening blue with the first stars peeking through. Inside, I could hear Jason laughing at something on the TV. That sound made me smile. This was my life now. Quieter, smaller in some ways, but more honest. No secrets, no deceit. Just me and my kids and a future that was once again unwritten and mine to write. I had lost a lot, but I had saved what was most important. And I had found something too. A new self-respect, forged in the fire of betrayal and sharpened by a relentless pursuit of justice. In the end, I didn't just break even, I came out stronger. I took everything that mattered back from those who would have taken it from me. I stood and stretched, feeling the cool evening air on my skin. With one last look at the darkening horizon, I turned and went inside, locking the door behind me. I had taken back my life and the future was mine once more. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.